Thank you for joining us. If you like books, if you like reading, if you like epigenetics, then you are in the right place. And brilliantly, debut author Stephen Twartz and I couldn't really be further apart. He's there in the beautiful Western Australia. I'm here in the southeast of England, and yet we can connect via Zoom. Stephen, it's lovely to meet you.
Oh, it's good to meet you too, Anna.
And it's good times because your debut novel has just come out, The Veiled Thread.
Yes.
How does it feel?
Oh, it feels absolutely wonderful to actually have the book in your hand and see it and realise that it's in the bookshops and internationally available with your name on it, and everything that you've done has culminated in this little thing with pages in it, and it's just fantastic. It really is.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
It's a wonderful, wonderful feeling, isn't it? Absolutely.
Wonderful feeling.
Now, tell me about the plot. I know we've got a grandfather and we've got a son, and we're harping back to the First World War, but give us a bit more details about what the book is about.
Okay, the book is in two parts that are interleaved. They're interleaved together. An old story that is a story from the turn of the last century, and a modern story, the present day. The grandfather goes through the First World War. He's in a situation where he's a light horseman in Palestine, fighting for the British Army, with the British Army in Palestine. And he sees the war through, comes out a very different person, and his life goes from being a very positive life to being a life of ruin. The other story is the grandson, and the grandson has very little to do with the grandfather, and he meets him as an old man, and that's the modern story, and starts to realise that there's something that connects them, and the thing that connects them is the trauma of war that the grandfather went through and the things that he did in Palestine. The grandson needs to understand and find out what those things were, what happened, to understand why he reacts the way he does to certain situations. There's depression, there's anger, and all of these sorts of things are coming out. These are inherited traumas. Yes, that's basically what the book is about.
Yeah, talk to me about inherited traumas, because I know it's also about epigenetics. Now, that sounds like a very scientific word. So explain what that means, and how do you inherit trauma?
Okay, we all know, we all recognise, and we've been taught that we inherit traits. We inherit blue eyes, 5 fingers, 5 toes, hair and hair colour. And that comes through the DNA, our DNA. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we were always taught about nurture. That was nature. The DNA thing was nature. Nurture. Nurture was we inherit or we learn certain things from our parents, from the people around us, from our cohort, for whatever, and we react in certain ways, and we do certain things. We have accent and all of these sorts of things. That is nurture. That's what we learn through association with other people. Now, in between, in the middle, there is a thing called epigenetics. Now, epi comes from the Greek, meaning above genetics. And what happens with the DNA is that certain sorts of trauma or whatever affect the way the DNA is the bits of the DNA are switched on and switched off. They're the genes. So if somebody goes through a war, for instance, and sees horrible things, has a lot of trauma, like a lot of the men did in the First World War, a ghastly war, they come home as young men still, have children, and what they do is that they pass on through the epigenetic mechanism, that is, things that are happening to switch on and switch off genes. It doesn't change the DNA, it just switches on and switches off genes. Then that affects how you react to certain things, that your propensity to things like depression and anger and all of these sorts of things. For instance, an example, this is a very long-winded response to your question. However,
fascinating. Yeah.
During the Second World War in Holland, there was a number of towns got cut off by the Nazis in Holland. The people in these small villages were existing on 500 calories a day. Very little. They called it the hunger winter in Holland at the time, the hunger winter. And what they've discovered through examination of these people is that successive generations have a propensity to thinness and various other syndromes. Now, these people have nothing to do with the original stimulus, the original hunger winter. However, 1, 2, 3, sometimes 4 generations later, there's still a propensity to thinness. Another example is the Holocaust, of course, and there are people who are 1, 2, 3 generations separated from the actual Holocaust and what happened in the death camps in Germany. However, they are exhibiting the anxiety and the stresses related to that. They've never been exposed to the original people. However, they are exhibiting these traits that, like anxiety and etc. So these are the results of epigenesis. Epigenetics doesn't change your DNA; it just switches on and switches off things. So yeah, that was a long-winded example. Yeah.
Yeah, and presumably that is the veiled thread that weaves its way throughout your book and connects the various characters, and without giving anything away, that's the journey that they're on.
That's the journey that they're on, and the veiled thread is an illusion. It's alluding to the thread that binds us all to the past, and that.
Yes.
But it's not clear. And it's very convoluted, it's very complex, and it's not something that is easily controlled. However, yes. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area, it's a fascinating topic. So what gave you the inspiration to start doing this and researching this area? Because it's not very often talked about, is it?
No, it isn't very often talked about. I guess it came through an examination of why I personally, most writers put a lot of themselves into their writing, into their narrative, without without your own experiences, your narrative, in my thinking, your narrative becomes rather thin. So what you need to do is you need to, and it's a writer's curse. You've got to put yourself into your writing. So I started to believe, or started to think, that there were things going on in my life that I didn't understand. And so I started to look at this. And then it became clear to me that I wasn't the only one that, I hesitate to use the word suffering, I wasn't the only one that was being moulded and directed by this epigenetic thing. I started to look at the response and the trauma that had occurred to our own Aboriginal population in Australia. A terrible history, and I started to realise, I realise now, that a lot of it is epigenetic. The current generation is suffering from the trauma of the past, and it's something that we have to unravel. But just how you unravel it, I'm not 100% certain.
Wow. Well, I've ordered my copy. Post is a bit slow at the moment, but I can't wait to get my teeth into that. I know I'm going to absolutely love it. So do you find then that, you know, you're in a beautiful part of the world? I actually cheekily Googled mapped like where you are in Western Australia there. It's absolutely beautiful. Do you find that that really inspires your writing, just being so close to nature?
It inspires several things. It inspires my art, because I'm an artist as well. But it inspires my creative spirit. I get these surges of inspiration and desire to create, and my art is one outlet for that. Writing is another, and I surf. I ride surfboards. And I ride surfboards in some rather interesting spots along the coast here, very wild coastline. And when you're sitting on a surfboard out in the surf in Western Australia, and you look back towards the shore and you look up and down the coast, it's humbling, because this earth, this beautiful, beautiful planet that we live on, is there, and it's open, and it's clear, and the water is clear, the sky's clear, and it's a beautiful thing. We live in a beautiful planet. Yes.
Yeah, we certainly do, don't we? And tell me, have you always written, or is it something that has come to you, maybe the art took precedence perhaps before, or has it always been bubbling away in the background?
It's always been going in the background. I've always had a love of words, and a love of imagery that you can create with words. When I was in primary school, what do you call it there? Primary school, or is it elementary school?
Yeah, primary.
Yes, I used to enter competitions when I was at school in writing. And my mother was a great inspiration for me, because she loved writing, but she also loved painting. And the painting that I do, the art that I create is also from my mother. My mother was very good and a very well-recognised potter in Sydney for many years. And she was my inspiration in that sense.
Yeah. And how did you find the process of writing a book, like a full-on novel? Because it's like climbing a mountain, isn't it? I mean, did you find that you went in fits and starts? Did it all just flow? Did you get writer's block? How was it for you?
Well, what I find, it's interestingly enough, what I find is I don't have too much difficulty with the actual writing, the actual writing. However, what I do have trouble with is sitting and starting chapters.
Yeah.
sitting there and figuring my way through how the narrative should be constructed, how the narrative should weave the web of the idea, that idea that you've got in your head, how it should retain and weave that web through each chapter and not lose itself in meaningless prose. You've got to be very clean. That's my style. Very clean, understated, not overstated. It's difficult, but you've got to keep at it. And one of the things that has stuck with me is a very good friend of mine, Andrew Jobling, has battered me with persistence. Forever be persistent and stick at it day. And even if you write 5 words a day, try and 5 words a day. And in those 5 words, you're thinking about what you have to write. So,
Yeah. And do you find being an artist helps? Because when you paint a picture, you are visually creating a scene. Do you try and do the same thing through the medium of words? Create something very pictorial that people can have a vivid image of at the end of the book?
Yes, I do. The fact of picking up a brush is very much like picking up a pen. Yes, you're painting words, painting pictures with words, and that's very similar indeed. It's
absolutely. Yeah.
I think in some ways the writing of words is more forgiving than the painting of a picture, because if you get it wrong, the picture doesn't work. It's completely wrong. Whereas with words, and typing the words or whatever, you can go back and you can alter it. Yeah, on the way through. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And if you had to describe the style of your genre of the veiled thread, what would you say? How would you categorise it?
I'd say, look, it's a mixture. It's a mixture of drama. Obviously, there's a big family drama in amongst this, and the family that I write about is dysfunctional. It's so there's a lot of drama in the way they're reacting to each other, and they've reacted to their past. They're all reacting in different ways. So it's a drama, but it's also an adventure. It's the reader will find that the old man, the original man, the grandfather's journey is an adventure. He goes from being a farm boy to being a devilish light horseman in the First World War, doing quite unpleasant things, to being a ruined person. So yeah, it's a journey, and it's an adventure. It's a drama, and it's also historical, because I've tried to stay very close to the facts. I think the reader will find that what I've written is factually based. So everybody will be able to dive for the history books and say, well, yes, that actually happened, but maybe not with these characters. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually, because I don't know whether you saw 1917 when it came out. I went to see it with my husband, and I was very thoughtful after it, and I thought, gosh, all these people how did they survive? Of course, many of them did, but what would that do to you as a person when you came home? So it's very, I think it's very zeitgeist at the moment as we look back, 100 years ago, and we think, well, how did they survive? And of course, yeah, every person that went through that had a family. That family would have been affected, and that's passed on to the children. You're right, it does go through the generations, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does indeed. And the generations have, in a sense, we have no concept of where those sorts of events take us as a people, as nations, as individuals within nations. We have no concept of where this thing is going to end up. And we do these terrible things, and we think, well, okay, that's over and done with, but it's not. It's not over and done with.
No. Speaking of over and done with, you've got to know these characters. As you say, it goes through the generations. Are you tempted now to write a sequel?
Yes, I've got in the works 2 more books, and
Great.
yeah, I've got the on my website. I have the synopsis, if you like, of the second book. The second book takes a look at the whole situation slightly differently. It concentrates on one of the major characters in the first book, and his journey through all of this. It's a man who went to. He's actually an indigenous stockman from Australia, and he went to Palestine with the grandfather and his brothers. And his story is quite different simply because of social circumstances, of what happened to his people, and so on. And that's the, if you like, the indigenous trauma aspect of what we've done to people in this world. Yeah.
And did you start with all the 3 in mind? Do you plot them all, or did you write the first one and then think, right, I'm not done yet?
No, I always had a concept that it couldn't be written in just one book. The one book would be, I don't know, it'd be a doorstop if you tried to put, yeah, exactly, if you tried to put it into one book. But no, the 3 books were definitely plotted in advance. The detail, no. The detail was left for the second book. Was left until the first book reached its conclusion. And as a writer too, what you find is that the characters take on a life of their own when you're writing. And in fact, the characters take me, have taken me to places that I didn't really realise they were going to take me. And the first book finished and ended where the characters, I think, wanted it to finish. And the second book is doing the same. And when I get to writing, when I get to sitting here at the keyboard, the characters are very, very, very much alive in my head. Yeah.
Isn't that a wonderful part of writing, though? The unknown. You sit down and you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know where you're going to go. You don't know where it's going to be. Yeah. It's wonderful, isn't it? Yeah. When do you think you'll finish the second book?
It's half written now, and I'd say probably by the end of this year. Particularly if this lockdown situation continues, I've got plenty of time. But yeah, so it's more than half written now, and I'll have it ready. Yeah, I'll have it
fantastic
ready for an eager public.
Absolutely. Now, talking of the eager public, where can we get our hands on your first book? Remind us of where we can buy it, where it's available.
Buy it at Waterstones. You can buy it at Pegasus Publishers, direct if you want to. You can buy it at Amazon, Book Depository, and any good bookstore. Yeah.
And while we're at it, let's take a moment to big up our publisher, because I'm also published by Pegasus. They're a wonderful publisher. Go to their website, have a peruse, all the things they're doing. And they're still working in lockdown as well. They're all working from home, bless them, at the moment. So they're doing a great job.
Yeah. Yes, they are a wonderful publisher, and they've been so helpful and very positive all the way through the process.
Likewise. Well, listen, it was wonderful talking to you. I shall leave you to your painting and your writing.
Okay.
But Stephen Twartz, it's been an absolute honour and a pleasure. And yet, don't forget to go out and buy The Veiled Thread, because you're going to need some reading material during lockdown. Let's face it. So I can't wait to read mine, as I said. And hopefully I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you, Anna. Thank you very much.